Well, good morning, everyone. The title of this talk is Complete Freedom. I have borrowed the title from Larry David, the writer and I think producer of the TV show Seinfeld. Honestly, I have never seen an entire episode of Seinfeld, and I don't quite recollect the one scene that takes place in a deli that I did see, but it was hilarious. Um, in any case, Larry David is the source of one of my favorite quotes. If you're not concerned with succeeding, then you can work with complete freedom. First of all, I am usually, if not always, concerned with succeeding. However, this quote reminds me, and the rest of us, what we all know about Zazen. If we have practiced for any length of time at Dharma Field or gotten meditation instruction there. Um, Being concerned with success in Zazen practice in any form, trying to get anything from Zazen, is not doing Zazen. It is, as Steve Hagen says so aptly, business as usual. I love that expression. This is our ordinary, everyday mind that is usually so successful at helping us achieve in a very limited way our very limited goals, fulfill our limited desires, etc. We have all heard this many times that Zazen is useless. Larry David's quote reminds us of this. I really do love the expression business as usual. This is also, as we have heard many times, and it has at times fallen on my ear with some unpleasantness, the way of our greedy, grasping mind. Just don't be upset by that. Um, we do all know this mind. It's useful. However unflattering the adjectives are. Noticing when we, noticing when we grasp, how we grasp, what grasping looks like is how we wake up. Just to notice this grasping is waking up. Be careful here, though, not to equate this with enlightenment. Just notice grasping mind, the mind that wants a blueprint for enlightenment so it can map out a way there, form a plan to gain enlightenment, and then storm the castle of enlightenment and declare it one's achievement, one's own accomplishment. This is being concerned with success. Complete freedom. For some time now, during this pandemic, that has caused us all quite a bit of inconvenience, if not outright heartbreak, I have been pondering trust with a capital T. This is the trust spoken of in trusting the heart mind. The poem starts out, the great way is not difficult. There is nothing it prefers. I'm not going to go into any kind of interpretation or discussion of this Taoist Zen poem, but I do want to draw your attention to this first line. In a beautiful way, it points to release from what is not from suffering. It points to release from suffering, where and when nothing is preferred, sought after, grasped for, or set over and against what is not preferred. There is no difficulty. There is release from suffering. There is relinquishing one's views. There is letting go. This is practiced in Zazen over and over. But to return to trust, I've been pondering how to put trust and faith in what cannot be grasped, conceptualized, understood intellectually, or relied on to be successful in our limited ways. These recent months have been, for good reason, very difficult for me. It is hard not to see how crazy we can get with our ideas about virtually everything, how utterly crazy and insane. Very recently, and I can't remember the details, an NPR commentator explained about the significance to some conspiracy theorists of March 4th, partly having to do with the fact that March 4th, prior to around 1933, was the day US presidents were inaugurated. However, there was some twist that formed part of another conspiracy theory that then rendered the original conspiracy theory suspect, untrustworthy to the original conspiracy theorists. All I can say is, wow, that's insanity. I've been finding it increasingly difficult to hear news about the suffering of the world, the cries of the world. They are everywhere. I have friends who live in Austin, Texas, and I've been almost distraught, I could say maybe even distraught, over the suffering my friends have endured due to food shortages, potable water shortages, no running water at all, no heat during periods of intense cold, and snowfall, 6 inches or so, which is absolutely unheard of in Austin, Texas. I lived there for many years before I moved here to do a postdoc. And then a year later met Steve and Jean. Anyway, I don't like imagining, after hearing it, people trying to boil snow in pans on their stoves so they can wash or flush their toilets. Stories of people, children even, freezing to death just leave me reeling. I'm not saying I'm the only one who experiences this, by no means. I'm just saying that cumulatively, after everything that has happened in the last year, I have difficulty hearing it. I burst into tears. I weep, I worry, I fret. I wake up in the middle of the night more than once in a panic, my heart racing, dread filling every available psychic space. It's not just over these things, but others. The recent events in Myanmar, the storming of the Capitol 2 months ago yesterday, the various horrors occurring worldwide due to climate change. The other day, I was at the Seward Co-op. I was leaving and I heard a familiar sound. The black trumpeter who stands outside food co-ops and plays his trumpet. He was playing a lovely song. It was actually a patriotic song, and I can't remember the name of it. I usually give him $5 or so for his playing, sometimes more if I'm feeling flush. I always stop and talk to him. We don't talk too intimately about much of anything. But I've been struck recently by how skinny he looks. He always stops playing and greets me. Neither one of us can remember the other's name. So he stopped playing, and I said, without much wisdom or elegance, "A lot of shit going down, man." And then I burst into tears. I was wearing a mask too, in fact, so the effect was a bit muted. He looked surprised. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, he told me to be strong. There was a young woman standing nearby. This is the Suet Co-op, imploring people to help her out. She was homeless, etc. She looked a bit shocked, like, what does that woman have to cry about? It was not an unkind look, though, and I may have been reading too much into it. I do like that trumpeter. I love the way he plays. Sometimes, lately, often, I have to remind myself not to be such a drama queen, but I have to do so respectfully so it doesn't turn into self-loathing. So the answer to the question of where or what to put one's faith and trust in should be easy. I still find it difficult. Why? Because I'm still conceptualizing. I've lost faith and to some extent heart, but I also am kind of lost, period. Of course, this is only relatively speaking. Steve has been reminding us over and over for years, but also specifically in the class on the grand delusion, that we do, in fact, know, in caps, we only ever experience truth, reality, wholeness, totality. This is absolutely what we know, unconditionally. I repeat, this knowledge is unconditioned. To realize this is nirvana, but I hate using words like that because they're confusing in their enticement. I have heard someone say that they have real trouble hearing that we already know the truth, that truth, enlightenment, freedom are our true nature. I find this very interesting. Why? Because really what the person is pointing to, perhaps without realizing it, is how they are grasping after ideas of truth, complete freedom, enlightenment. They have ideas about what not being separate from the truth looks like. And in their mind's eye, they fall way short of that and don't know how to arrive where they desire to be vis-a-vis this vision, this encapsulation of enlightenment. If only they could let go of their ideas and in this way see how they are grasping after ideas, then they would be much less bothered by hearing that. Maybe they could start to have some faith in that. Also, maybe they, and I'm talking to myself here, could start to see that any idea about enlightenment, truth, freedom is very limited, is not at all the entire picture. We can all understand this discomfort, this unease, this dis-ease, and maybe have compassion for ourselves and others. I think this is very important. I think that when I get so angry about various delusions I hear people indulge themselves in, that I need to remember that. I liked very much Steve's recent emphasis in a few classes on the grand delusion that reality with a capital R is illusory, sort of with a capital I. What shows up, appearances, are empty of substantiality. We cannot put our trust and faith in them, in appearances, but we can put our trust and faith in their very illusoriness, their emptiness, the quality that makes them a manifestation of mind with a capital M. I've heard people recently start to squirm a little over the use of the word mind. It's not that I don't understand squirming, but I do rather like that term. I can't explain it. I'm not sure what else we would call it. So now I want to turn to Buddhism Plain and Simple, Steve's book. I am grateful that Steve Matushak is having us read from that, from the Kakayanagoda Sutta, and from what the Buddha taught. For those of you who are not in the class, and it's still not too late to sign up, these constitute our reading list. On page 22 of Buddhism, Plain and Simple, Steve says, we often cast our spiritual quest, our grappling with fundamental human issues, as a journey. But the kind of journey we will embark upon now is not a journey in the usual sense of the word. Generally, we think of a journey as involving movement and either going out somewhere into the world or else looking inward into the self. But in Buddhism, our journey must go nowhere, neither in or out. Rather, ours is a journey into nearness, into immediacy. Our journey must be to awaken here and now, to awaken to here and now. To be fully alive, we must be fully present. Before I continue from the book, I would like to point out a few things. If we think of the journey as either inward into the self or outward somewhere into the world, then we continue to maintain a fiction. The fiction that there actually is an in as opposed to out. We end up clinging to an illusion of me in here and you or it out there. It ignores wholeness, the totality of life. As Steve Matushak pointed out recently in class, when we bow to the cushion in the Zendo, we can see that the entire universe is evident wherever we look, whether at the cushion, the floor, the windows, etc. He went through how once we see the true nature of the cushion, what went into its construction, its dependence, what went into its construction, its makeup, we see that the object as such does not stand alone independently. Its very appearance is dependent on a million different conditions. These conditions include the growing of the substance that makes up the material covering the cushion, the growing of the kapok that fills the cushion, the planting, the harvesting, the nurturing in various ways of the people doing the growing and harvesting, the transport of the materials, what went into building the roads on which the transport occurs, and on and on. We can see that really there is no such thing as the extremes of birth and death, that there is no end and no beginning to any of this. Steve Hagen uses a shortcut to describe this. He says, we can see life in all its vibrancy and immediacy at once. As Norm would say, but don't hold on to this as an idea. Don't try to grasp this. This actually cannot be grasped. It can only be experienced directly, immediately. Steve goes on. On page 24, he says, you are already in reality, whether you see it or not. Reality is what's here now. Thus, you're here now, too. You know this already from direct experience. You're not separated from reality. It's not out there somewhere, but right here. This provides us with a chance to wake up. You have this chance to wake up right now, in this moment and in every moment. Thus, enlightenment is already yours. So skipping a paragraph and going on to the next one. You are already enlightened. All you've got to do is stop blocking yourself and get serious about attending to what's going on. You're not lacking a thing. You only need to stop blocking or interpreting your vision. So the other day, in the midst of a bout of despair, I called Steve to talk to him. I tried to paint a picture of my wretchedness, my feeling of wretchedness, of feeling overwhelmed, of being unable to cope with the enormity of things. He said a bunch of things, but one of the most helpful was just put one foot in front of the other. This is all I can do, certainly. Sometimes I wonder, what's Steve talking about when he speaks of this immediate, vibrant reality? So then I need to see how, as he puts it, I'm blocking myself and not attending to what's going on. I was eating some lunch on Friday, a cauliflower salad from Whole Foods. And yes, I'm a food snob. The salad was called crackling cauliflower. The cauliflower is cooked with curry powder, red onions, peas, other spices, and then dressed lightly. It's delicious. However, I found myself eating it and thinking about how virtuous I was being eating this crackling cauliflower, how good it is for me, how it's not something I would regard as not good for me, etc., something that I could otherwise be eating. I didn't catch myself until much later. I had turned the enjoyment of the dish into an exercise in virtuous eating, not seeing how much I was actually enjoying the taste and texture of it. I was just not seeing that, in fact, there was the ability just to enjoy it for what it was, that there was just being fully in the moment of enjoyment. It's immediacy and vibrancy. Hence, you can see how sometimes I just blind myself to this immediate, vibrant reality. On page 24 of Buddhism, Plain and Simple, Steve points out in his final talk about his death, in his final talk before his death, the Buddha said, each of you be a light unto yourself. Betake yourself to no external refuge. Hold fast to the truth. Look not for refuge to anyone besides yourself. One way to see this is to realize that anything other than being fully present in the moment is taking refuge in something external to oneself. Living by ideas, concepts, beliefs is taking refuge in something external, but they don't hold up. They don't support, nourish, or free us. Steve continues, you are the final authority, not me, not the Buddha, not the Bible, not the government, not the president, not mom or dad. You, no community of philosophers, scientists, priests, academicians, psychologists, I added that word, politicians or generals, no school, legislature, parliament, or court can bear responsibility for your life or your words or your actions. That authority is yours and yours alone. You can neither get rid of it or escape it. In part, this quote struck me because I had a conversation on the phone with Fiona about the upcoming trial next week. of Derek Chauvin. She was talking about the complexities of the context. And I was struck by how we sort of weave our way in and out of ideas about things like anything, you name it. And suddenly it struck me, well, really, I said to her, who is responsible for his actions? Um, anyway, this gets so tricky, so I'm not going to go there anymore. Um, so Steve is saying we can trust our own authority. Suzuki Roshi calls this self-respect. We can trust this because we already know, see, and are enlightened. Steve goes on, far from being a burden, this ultimate authority is quite wonderful. It means that you have the power to wake up. You have it now in your own hands. You don't have to go anywhere else. You can wake up right now on the spot. You are fully equipped to do this now, in this moment. You already have all the power you'll ever need to realize happiness. In other words, you're fully prepared for anything that might come along. Each of us has the power simply to be what we are, with nothing extra added. Nothing's lacking, nothing's missing. You are, you are supported and sustained right now, even though you may not realize it or realize how. The banquet is spread before you, and you do find nourishment. So that was all part of the quote. So this points to another aspect of what Steve Matushak was talking about when he talked about how the entire universe can be seen in the meditation cushion. For example, to see this is to see how we are supported in meditation, in our practice, in wholehearted effort. The entire universe is showing up this way, and in this way, we are supported. We are supported in simply being who we are, as we are. But don't confuse this with ideas about individuality or about how you, in particular, are supported. It doesn't work that way. Steve continues to completely end your unease of mind. All you really need to see is that there is nothing really out there to get, because already in this moment, everything is whole and complete. Let me emphasize that what Steve is saying is not a matter of believing this. In answering my own questions and trying to ease the ache of my own heart, I have to look at what the source of disease is. So when I look, I can observe that regardless of what anyone is saying, or who is in charge right now, or that the sun is shining now in this moment, nothing can be counted on to remain the same. There are no circumstances that do not change. I have to look at my own mind. I can see it leaning one way or the other toward the direction I want things to go, and away from how I fervently do not want them to go. However, that is not a stable mind. That is not a mind of peace and freedom. But I can see this and just let go. I can just come back to here and now. So maybe I can be pleased with the fact of the outcome of the election, for example. But then what? Then what? And as circumstances unfold, the then what gets bigger and bigger. Any ideas I might have about all of that can change in a moment. I do get caught up in complacency about events in particular, but these are illusory. They are completely dependent on changing circumstances. Suzuki Roshi says the same thing, but he puts it a little differently. In To Polish a Tile, on page 80 of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he says, Zen stories or koans are very difficult to understand before you know what we are doing, moment after moment. But if you know exactly what we are doing in each moment, you will not find koans so difficult. Suzuki is talking about being fully present with, or to, or in each moment as it shows up. This is to put one foot in front of the other. He says, I have often talked to you about a frog, and each time everybody laughs. But a frog is very interesting. He sits like us too, you know, but he does not think that he is doing anything so special. When you go to a zendo and sit, you may think that you are doing some special thing. And your spouse, you may think that you are doing some special thing. While your husband or wife is sleeping, you are practicing zazen. You are doing some special thing, and your spouse is lazy. That may be your understanding of zazen. But look at the frog. He also sits like this, but he has no idea of zazen. Watch him. If something annoys him, he will make a face. If something comes along to eat, he will snap it up and eat. And he eats sitting. Actually, this is our zazen, not any special thing. I was struck by Suzuki Roshi's reference to being concerned with the fact that here I or you am sitting in zazen, and maybe our spouse is lying in bed or eating or doing something else, and we get caught up in that. So this is what Suzuki is pointing to when he uses the frog as an example, is complete freedom of mind. Just be fully present in zazen without what Steve would call petty concerns, such as what our spouse is doing, is complete freedom of mind. I'm going to read a little bit more from Suzuki. On page 80, so he points to a koan, and it's a lengthy koan. It has to do with Baso and Nangaku. Nangaku is the Zen master, and Baso, who is also a great Zen master, is his student. He says, Nangaku asks, what are you doing? And Baso says, I am practicing zazen. And Nangaku says, why are you practicing zazen? And Baso says, I want to attain enlightenment. I want to be a Buddha. Do you know what the teacher did? He picked up a tile and he started to polish it. In Japan, after taking a tile from the kiln, we polish it to give it a beautiful finish. So Nangaku picked up a tile and started to polish it. And Baso says, what are you doing? And Nangaku says, I want to make this tile into a jewel. How is it possible to make a tile a jewel? Baso asks. And Nangaku says, how is it possible to become a Buddha by practicing zazen? He says, do you want to attain Buddhahood? There is no Buddhahood besides your ordinary mind. When a cart does not go, which do you whip, the cart or the horse? Nangaku's meaning here is that whatever you do, that is Zazen. True Zazen is beyond being in bed or sitting in the Zendo. If your husband and wife or wife is in bed, that is Zazen. If you think I am sitting here and my spouse is in bed, then even though you are sitting here in the cross-legged position, that is not true Zazen. He says you should be like a frog, always. He says, if we are like a frog, we are always ourselves. But even a frog sometimes loses himself. I don't know about you, but when I sit in Zazen in the mornings, I frequently lose myself. If something comes along, the frog will snap it up and eat it. So I think a frog is always addressing himself. I think you should do that also. Even in Zazen, you will lose yourself. When you become sleepy or when your mind starts to wander about, you lose yourself. Because you lose yourself, your problem will be a problem for you. If you do not lose yourself, then even though you have difficulty, there is actually no problem whatsoever. You just sit in the midst of the problem. When you are a part of the problem, or when the problem is a part of you, there is no problem because you are the problem itself. The problem is you yourself. If this is so, there is no problem. Wow. So, given that I have felt overwhelmed by problems, this is a good pointer for me. Just to be my problem, just to not to be distracted, just to sit with whatever pain is showing up, is to be the problem. And that is the solution. That is the solution to be the problem. I'm sorry, that is the solution to the problem. Suzuki says, when your life is always a part of your surroundings. In other words, when you are called back to yourself, when you are called back to yourself in the present moment, then there is no problem. So this is what the Buddha said when he said, be a light unto yourself. Betake yourself to no external refuge. What is that external refuge? This is anything that shows up that we get involved in, that we get distracted by, that we get carried away by. Suzuki says, when you start to wander about in some delusion, which is something apart from you yourself, that's the fundamental delusion, that there is something apart from. Then your surroundings are also a misty, foggy delusion. Once you are in the midst of delusion, there is no end to delusion. You will be involved in deluded ideas, one after another. Most people live in delusion, involved in their problem, trying to solve their problems. But just to live is actually to live in problems. And to solve the problem is to be part of it, to be one with it. I'm reminded by the 84th problem. The 84th problem that the Buddha discussed with the farmer. We all have the 83 problems. And this story usually annoys the hell out of me But the 84th problem, that 84th problem, that we don't want to have any problems. Boy, I get that. I don't want to have any problems. So what do I end up doing? I end up pushing away the very thing that can nourish, as Suzuki says, nourish our practice. These problems can nourish our practice when we don't push them away, when we just take them up as our life. I'm going to say one more thing. So which do you hit, Suzuki says, the cart or the horse? To make it go, by the way, this is to make the cart go. Which do you hit, the cart or the horse? Which do you hit, yourself or your problems? If you start questioning which you should hit, this or that, out there or in here, that means you have already started to wander about. But when you actually hit the horse, the cart will go. In truth, he says, the cart and the horse are not different. When you are you, there is no problem of whether you hit the cart or the horse. When you are you, Zazen becomes true Zazen. So when you practice Zazen, your problem will practice Zazen, and everything else will practice Zazen too. Even though your spouse is in bed, he or she is also practicing Zazen when you practice Zazen. But when you do not practice true Zazen, then there is your spouse, there is yourself, each quite different, quite separate from the other. So if you yourself have true practice, then everything else is practicing our way at the same time. So Suzuki is pointing to that universality. He's pointing to what the Buddha said when he woke up. He said, when he woke up, he said, I, the great earth, and all beings simultaneously attain the great way. This is what Suzuki is pointing to. Just this sitting, just this being fully yourself, fully present in Zazen. The great earth, all beings simultaneously attain the way. This is that universal dimension that's pointed to in the calligraphy depicting the practice of Zazen. Two people sitting on the earth. We never sit alone. And I am not going to lie to you and say I fully understand this, because I don't. But I will say that maybe I could start to trust this a little. Well, you know what? I'm tired, and it's 10:45, and I never make it to 11. So we're going to stop here, and I'll take questions if you want to ask them. And I just want to say how glad I am to see you, Cal. That doesn't mean I'm not glad to see everyone, but I was a little worried about Cal. Is there a hand from Michael?
It was a thumb up.
Oh, that was a thumb up. Okay.
Actually, it was a hand. I have ways of responding. or I don't know what button to push. I mean,
don't worry about it. I never.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, so you should take that as a combination: thumbs up, hand, boy, atta girl, whatever. But you know, I want to read something to you and get your reaction to it. And I just happened to have read this last night. I'll do it very quickly.
Take your time.
Okay, here it is. And when I say philosopher, don't read philosopher as the way we think about it traditionally, because this goes back like a couple of thousand years. Never call yourself a philosopher and don't talk much among laymen about philosophical principles, but act according to them. And if you should come upon a discussion among laymen about some philosophical principle, keep silent for the most part, for there is great danger that you will immediately vomit up what you have not digested. And when someone says to you that you know nothing and you're not stung by the taunt, know then that you are making headway. Sheep don't sheep don't throw up their grass to show the shepherd how much they have eaten. After digesting the grass inside, they bear wool and milk outside. So for you too, don't display your learning to the uninstructed. Display the action that result from the digestion of it. As you were talking, I thought, I got to get this thing and read it to you. uh, I unfortunately, I live and work in an environment where if you go to a meeting and there are 30 people there, um, all 30 are the smartest person in the room. And so there's this tremendous tendency to want to respond to it or solve problems. And sometimes it is just so hard to sit there and see how bad you think something is and decide not to say, to say something. So
Yes,
anyway, I thought about this and I just wanted to read it and share it with you. Thank you for your talk.
thank you very much. Um, yeah, I know the impulse to when you're with, you know, I don't even know how to put it, of being with people, every one of whom thinks he or she is the smartest in the room. I actually haven't had that experience in a while. There haven't been many people in the rooms I've been in lately. Um, and occasionally one of the docs I work with will say some utterly ridiculous thing, not about, well, it doesn't matter what. But and I find that for the most part, I just keep my mouth shut. Um, People don't want to be reminded sometimes of how stupid some of the things they say sound. I don't know. David said right before my talk, he said, I've decided I want to be a Zen stand up comedian. And I said, and this is really stupid, I said, maybe you want to be a Zen sitting comedian. Um, weak. Thank you, Michael. Um, uh, I appreciate listening. I appreciate the comment. It's always good to see you. It's so good to see everyone. Anybody else? Anything else? Thank you. Thank you.